Well, I've just finished watching everything that there was to watch today. Watch the stock shareholders report, the time of Elon standing in front of the crowd and answering questions for almost an hour. I think for an hour, and then he goes on and sits down with David Faber for another hour. So much news today. Hope that this is valuable to this Randy Kirk. Hit like and subscribe and notify and join my Patreon, and let's get into what is maybe one of the biggest news days for Tesla and Elon Musk, and maybe for the world in a very, very long time. So I'm going to take this in the order I have it on the list, and sometimes that may not be the perfect order, but that's the way I've got it, and that's the way it's going to be today. So let's start with kind of a restatement on the question of materials needed to make the transition into the all electric future, whether it's EVs, whether it's solar and wind and battery storage. Elon reiterated that he believes there's no issue with lithium, plenty of lithium to make the transition. So I thought that was huge news. I mean, he's hinted at that a couple of times recently. I talked about this, I think 6 or 7 months ago, saying that my look at things tended to be showing that there was plenty of lithium. He's saying the real issue is still with refining, which is why they've opened the refinery plant down in Corpus Christi, and that Corpus Christi plant will be doing as much lithium refining as all of the rest of the lithium refining that's done in the rest of the world outside of China. So that's a pretty wild deal. Okay, so I think that was really useful to know. Once again, Tesla is going to be handling that downstream issue. It's one of those issues that we talk about. Excuse me, just 2 seconds. It's one of those issues we talk about so often, is that Elon thinks way out in advance, so much further in advance, I think, than the others in the industry. And this is an important reason why I'm an investor and why I'm so interested in the subject. So let's move on to part 2 here, number 2. So during question, if you didn't watch this, it'd be really fun for you to go back and see if you can find a snippet. I didn't pull the snippet because I wanted to present this as quickly as possible. Anyway, question and answer is going on. The question was, hey, is it time to advertise? And why won't you advertise? And he said later, when in his conversation with David Faber, he made this decision on the fly and promised the shareholders that were there at the meeting that he would begin some small amount of advertising. Since he was making it on the fly, he was unable to give Faber any kind of color on that in terms of how much or what kind or what direction he would take, other than the fact, knowing Elon as we do, that this is going to be educational. This is going to be more like content. He's going to make it as much like content. He said, content and beautifully done. So not glitzy, silly stuff, but rather let's inform the public. And that was kind of the way Ask Kevin actually was the one who brought it up. It was his question. And he said, it would seem like the public doesn't know about the safety. They don't know about the pricing right now being lower than the average car in the United States. They don't know about some of the other aspects of what makes Tesla amazing. So that was huge, massive news. I have to tell you, I was sitting there alone and I laughed out loud for about almost a minute, I think, because I was like, oh my gosh, it was like watching the buzzer beater at the end of the Final Four, Anyway, so the next thing was that John, my buddy John, Dr. John Gibbon, I'm always doing that. Dr. Know-It-All, he asked his question. I don't quite remember the question he asked, because the question he asked, he ended up with a second question. He says, would you give me an interview? And Elon thought about it for a while. He actually asked for 2 hours. And Elon thought about it for a while, and he actually said, yes, he'll give him an interview. Now, let's remember that I think a little over a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, he said that he would get 2 or 3 YouTubers, or maybe, some group of YouTube folks like me together and do an interview with them as a group, which I don't think that ever happened, although Spaces has kind of solved that issue. But anyway, this is going to be on Spaces. And we'll see how long it takes before John gets his interview. And I'm sorry, John, for blowing your last name again. I can't believe your name is right on the cover. All I have to do is look over my shoulder here, and it says, oh, yes, Dr. John Gibbs. I don't know why I want to put a second syllable in there. All right, let's go on to the next thing. So the next thing, everybody was saying, I was at a couple of earlier things on the internet, and people were saying, well, Randy, do you think there'll be an Optimus section today? I said, probably not. Other things will be more important. Well, I was about as thrilled as I could be. There they were, multiple. We don't know if the same 5 were shown in 3 different settings or whether there's 8 or 12, but there was at least 5 fully working, fully operational Optimi, walking around and then going over and doing functions, and the very nice little video talking about how that they're increasing their capabilities, step by step. And one, which was interesting, was showing a human operator doing a task, and the Optimus being wired in as such to the human doing the task as a method for training. So anyway, I'm sure we'll get Dr. John and Scott Walter on my show to talk about what they saw in that video and what it really means. But what it says to me more than any other single thing, this Optimus issue is way up on Elon's list and way up on Tesla's list of what's important for the company. And he went on to say that the revenue resource of Optimus will be greater than all of the rest of Tesla. I think he said all the rest. I don't think he said it would just be the #1 generator. I think he said that the revenue generation from Optimus would be greater than all of the rest of Tesla combined. So we're talking about, and this would have to mean trillions of dollars of revenues with potentially extremely high margins. Hey, speaking of that, I didn't put on my list, he was asked some questions about margins. It was pretty interesting to see that he thinks that the margins for cars will stay in this 20 to 25 roughly range, but that once FSD becomes real, the margins will be closer to 80%. So that was a pretty interesting statement. And then he said on energy storage margins that would probably stay in the 25 to 30 or more percentage range. So anyway, a couple of other interesting insights that I'm not sure that a lot of people would have maybe not have paid as much attention. All right. He was asked about FSD. He said on multiple occasions, trying to tell him, no, don't give us another date by which. And he said, yeah, I still think it'll be this year. The reason for that is he's talked about these. I'm not an AI scientist, and I'm not an algorithm person, but you have these maximums, and they're algorithmic maximums where you've gotten gains that are in an S curve, and then at a certain point that curves this way, and then your gains stop, and you can't get past those gains. And he says that's happened over and over and over again in the development of FSD, and you think you're almost there, but you can't get past that maximum, and so you need to engineer or invent your way to the next level so that you can start a new S curve. And this has happened over and over. I'm guessing that it's happened at least 6 times, maybe over the last 6 years. And so he's saying this one appears, the current set of data, there's going to be 100% AI that'll be large language driven and using all the techniques of AI that they have available. He believes that this will not have a maximum that will stop them. So then it all becomes a matter of a combination of data and compute. If I got that wrong, please put it in the comments below. But I believe that once you have that, the software working the way you want to, once you've got the neural net doing what it needs to do, then it's really only a matter of how much data and whether the data has enough compute in order to take care of all the edge cases and all the situations that are still to be done. He mentioned, like James Dowman did the other day, that pretty much the safety issues are done. He's been able to drive, Elon said he's been able to drive point to point, even random points in San Francisco and in Austin with virtually no interruptions. So anyway, that's where we are on that. This is going to be a long video because there was so much. Anyway, he was asked about the Roadster. He says the Roadster is almost done with 100% of the design and the engineering, and so it should pop in 2024. He says, but it's really low on the list of priorities. So if it's not 2024, don't shoot me. So maybe it'll be 2024. At least it'll be ready to go in 2024. Pricing. He was asked, what about the price changes and all these prices up and down? He points out, interestingly, something I hadn't really thought through completely. The price of a car up until Tesla was all based on what the dealer wanted to charge. Because in the United States, you can't tell the dealer what to charge. It's against the law. So the dealer could up the charge based on shortages of this material, in other words, over MSRP, or if times are tough and he really needs to move inventory, he can drop the price below MSRP. And you can walk in the door and you're a good negotiator and you can negotiate the price down, and the next person that walks in the door isn't as good a negotiator and they pay a higher price. And then you could go into this dealer in, let's say I'm in Riverside, you go to a dealer in Riverside and that dealer needs money this month. And so he's lowering his prices more than the dealer that's in San Bernardino, who doesn't need to make that much money this month. And so he's holding his prices even. And then it depends on the salesman you get. It just goes on and on and on. With Tesla, you actually have the most certainty by far, most transparency, because you can go right on the internet and there's no haggling and there's no decision. There it is. That's the price today. Now, the price could go down tomorrow, but that's true for all the dealers as well. So you really have more certainty and more transparency with Tesla than you do with traditional dealer networks. All right, next, dealers. I already talked about that. Okay, the IRA. So I did a whole video on this this morning. No, I forget when, Sunday morning. I did a whole video on it. Nobody watched it. I don't know what. It was a very, very low result, maybe because of Mother's Day. You might want to go back and look at it. I go into the great detail about what the amount of money is that Tesla is going to make off of the Inflation Reduction Act. How much money Tesla will make off of that? I said that the numbers that Morgan Stanley put out there were completely wrong, but I also said that the numbers that Tesla put out were wrong. So Morgan Stanley said 3 to 5 billion this year, and Tesla, Zach Kirkhorn said about $1 billion this year. I'm saying it's 2 billion this year. Elon said, no, it's about half of what Morgan Stanley said. Well, that sounds like my number. Next year, Morgan Stanley and I were pretty much on the same page. Elon said it would be about 22%, roughly half again of what the percentage that Morgan Stanley gave, which was 44%. He says, no, it'll probably be about 22% additional earnings on top of what earnings would otherwise be. So if next year earnings would have been 20 billion in 2024, which is probably realistic, then my 6 billion next year would be certainly in the ballpark of that. So anyway, I'm saying, okay, use 22% from now until we hear better. We're going to use 22% of what the earnings would have otherwise been in the parts of the business that require batteries, because if it's insurance, it doesn't require batteries. Okay, so that's a good number to have. I thought that was really newsmaking. And nobody's counting it in, nobody's modeling it. So now we have a great way to model it, 22%. All right. Shanghai. So apparently they have plenty of demand in Shanghai for product. Elon is saying they're having trouble expanding in Shanghai. So that is really interesting. And then this morning there was it wasn't just a rumor, it was somebody reporting on some permitting that was being sought in China for an expansion, significant expansion of the Shanghai facility that appeared to be for probably the new model, the new Generation 3 model, as well as some other issues, some other things. It looked like some pouches, some pouch batteries. Very weird. We need to do more research on that. But anyway, he says they're having trouble expanding Shanghai. But they would like to, apparently they would like to expand Shanghai. So that was extremely interesting to know. Let's see. There was one more thing that we really needed to talk about with regard to Tesla, and it's now gone out of my mind. Maybe it'll come back. And oh, I know, it's would be the thing I was hoping and expecting to be the top of the news today out of the board meeting, was the new Model 3 refresh, the Highland. It was intimated about. There was a picture, kind of a not a very much of a picture of a vehicle that looked like it might have been a Model 3. And he talked about the two next products coming out that would require a reveal day. So I had a couple of folks telling me today, no, he said it would require its own reveal. So I'm hoping that we're looking for a Model 3 refresh reveal in the next 60 days. And he said that combined with the next product, which has got to be the Gen 3 vehicle, would represent about 5 million vehicles per year in sales. That was his estimate. So another thing to put into our list of things that we're watching. All right, then he goes on to Twitter and to AI. He said that, he said of Linda, the new CEO, he says, yes, of course I brought her in because she's an advertising genius. And yes, she's also a great exec. So yes, it will dramatically reduce the amount of time that he's spending with Twitter, and that time can now be devoted to aspects of Tesla. But where does he want to spend his time on Tesla? Yes, with product and with development of, in fact, AI. He says repeatedly to in the meeting as well as afterwards in the David Faber interview, he said, look, Tesla is by far the most advanced company on the planet with regard to general AI. And his example that he gave was great. He says, look, we'll assume for the moment that Google and Microsoft, these fellows are top of the list when it comes to these language models where you are trying to ask it a question and get an answer, create graphs, create spreadsheets, create artwork, etc. They are the absolute leaders, and Tesla is behind them by a great deal. Tesla, on the other hand, is way ahead in full self-driving, autonomous driving, robotics, undoubtedly, because he says it's exactly the same computer who's going to run the robots that run the cars. So he says, we're just way out ahead of Google or anybody else with regard to that. They're way down here. He says, now, if you all of a sudden said today, Tesla, you need to catch up on the kind of AI that Google and Microsoft, et cetera, are way ahead on, and you also told them they had to catch up with us on autonomous driving, who would win that race? And he says it wouldn't even be close. Yes, they have the compute, they have the data, they have the wherewithal, they have the engineers, they have the computer scientists, they have the AI experts. If they wanted to compete in the AI space like ChatGPT, Bard, etc., they could do it rapidly. So that I thought was also newsworthy. He said when talking about the whole thing with OpenAI, that was his name, it wouldn't exist without him. He said it was only 50 billion that he put up, but he had to think about it a long time. The reporting on that is he put up 100 billion, but who's counting? But he says no, he wouldn't exist without him. He hired the top talent. He came up with a name, and the whole goal of it was to produce a general AI that was open sourced, and that was for public good. It was set up as he said it was a 501c3, which is a charitable organization where if you donate money to it, it's charitable. But then he also said a couple of times about not-for-profit. That's a different kind of corporation. A not-for-profit corporation it doesn't get charitable donations like a 501c3 does that are write-offs to the IRS. So I'm not sure which one it was, but either way, it was not supposed to be about profit. And he says basically at this point, Microsoft controls OpenAI because they put in 10 billion, and all the goodies they got, he made a list of things like the rights to the software that's being produced, like I guess ChatGPT, etc. Some of the processes, I think. Anyway, you'd have to go back and listen to that because it was over my head. That's why I don't remember. But anyway, he says, yeah, basically they could just tell OpenAI, the leadership there, to just run along, children. We'll take over. So that obviously has made him very unhappy. He used an analogy. I know he's not supposed to use analogies, right? Only first principle. But anyway, he used an analogy. He says, what if you were donating money to a company that was supposed to save the rainforest in the Amazon, and then all of a sudden it got $10 billion from Microsoft or from a lumber company, and the next day started chopping down trees like crazy? That's kind of the way he feels about what happened at OpenAI. And he said he was foolish for not making sure that he had managed what his rights and responsibilities were with regard to his contribution. So anyway, there's that story. He ended in his last part of the day with David Faber at CNBC. By the way, it was a good interview. It was a very good interview. I thought all of today went over a lot of stuff that you know and I know, but there was, as you can tell, some very, very news-making things. He finally says, what about future career path? How do you make a career? And he thought a long time about that. He was even asked, what about your kids? What are you telling them to do for a career? And he says, you're probably just going to have to follow the things that you love and that are interesting to you and that motivate you, and then go do them, and make sure you just stay on top of it, because a lot of jobs are going to be lost because of these futuristic elements. He even said that he gets himself into a quandary about whether he should be participating in general AI, whether he should be creating robots, because at some point, does that mean that we all have a purposeless existence? He says he sometimes just has to not think about that and just move forward on the process that he believes is right, because somebody's going to make these robots. Somebody's going to do general AI. He wants to do it right. He wants to do it in a way that benefits humanity and that doesn't destroy humanity. But he acknowledged that you can have humanity continue to exist, but without purpose, have you still gotten a bad result? Well, I would say yes. So maybe we'll do a program someday where we get somebody on and talk about philosophically, what are some of the jobs that might continue to exist 20, 40, 50 years from now? How should you be telling your children to consider career choices in the future? I would say stay curious. That's always mine. Stay curious. Anyway, this is Randy Kirk. I hope you've enjoyed it, and it's been great talking to you.